She said I was the strongest woman she knew, but she never asked why I was quiet. What if I told you my silence wasn't strength? It was survival. In the next few minutes, you'll hear what no one in my family ever did. Not my daughter, not my husband, not even myself, for a long time. I was 15 when it started. Everyone said I smiled a lot. They thought that meant I was fine. They never looked closer. This is my story, and it's not what you think. Thank you for being here. Have you ever smiled so long you forgot how not to? Drop a word in the comments. Anything. Where in the world are you right now? What hour finds you here? And if quiet stories with sharp edges speak to you, stay close and subscribe. There's more coming. My grandma always smiles. I don't think she has feelings. That's what Emma said, loudly, into a microphone, in front of a school cafeteria full of parents, teachers, and sleepy-eyed children, half listening to Grandparents' Day speeches. Some people chuckled politely. Others nodded as if that were sweet. I smiled, of course, not because it was sweet, not because I agreed. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. And I kept smiling as the applause came, as Emma ran off stage, as my daughter patted my arm and whispered, "She loves you so much, Mom. That was cute." Cute. I smiled through lunch, through juice boxes and cafeteria meatloaf, through awkward small talk with other grandmothers who crocheted and golfed and lived in pastel condos. I smiled all the way home in the back seat of my daughter's van, Emma beside me, humming Taylor Swift songs out of tune. But something cracked. It cracked quietly. The way ice under your boot heel cracks when you're halfway across a frozen lake. I didn't speak during dinner. I just nodded, smiled. When they all went to bed, I crept into my room and opened the old cedar chest, the one with the faint smell of mothballs and lavender. There, wrapped in yellowed paper, was the photo album, and tucked inside the back cover, a letter, folded once. The paper had curled edges, like it was trying to forget its own contents. It was addressed to the school board of Eddington County, postmarked, March 3rd, 1962, never mailed. I ran my finger over the crease. To whom it may concern. My handwriting, younger, angrier. I didn't need to read it. I knew every word. And still, I read it. Out loud. My voice cracked on the third sentence. Not from pain, from shock that it still hurt. They think I don't have feelings. Maybe because I buried them under 30 years of polite nods and potato salad. But I remember. God help me. I remember everything. I never mailed it. I was 15. Who would have believed me? I was wearing a wool skirt that day. Gray. It itched behind my knees, but I sat perfectly still, just like Mama taught me. Back straight, hands folded, smile tucked in. Mr. Alden had a voice like warm syrup. Everyone said so, especially the other girls. Even the secretary smiled too wide when he walked by. He leaned over my desk, breath sweet with mint and smoke, and placed a hand lightly, so lightly, on my wrist. "You've got beautiful hands, Lillian. You should be a nurse." I said thank you, because back then, that's what we did. We said thank you. I reread the letter again, alone in the dim light of my bedroom. It wasn't just about that one touch. It wasn't even about the biology pop quizzes he gave only the girls, with questions scribbled on the back like, "What color are your panties today?" It was about the silence, the way the room went quiet when I walked in, the way other teachers looked away, the way I told Mama, and she slammed the kitchen drawer so hard the silverware screamed. "Don't you lie to me, Lillian May. You want people thinking you're some kind of temptress? He's a man of the church." I still remember the smell of burned bacon and the exact way her voice broke when she said, "You'll ruin this family with your stories." That was the night I wrote the letter. I used Papa's typewriter, the one he left when he died, typed slowly, carefully, deleting nothing. I didn't even cry. Not until I showed it to her. She read it once, folded it neatly, then took it from my hands and slid it into the drawer behind her Bible. If I ever see this again, I'll burn it. I never saw it again. Not until last night. But I had felt it every single day since. Funny thing is, I never even told my husband. Not once in 42 years. Because what was the point? By then I had become someone else. Someone quiet. Someone who smiled too much. I've smiled through births and funerals, through weddings and one near divorce, through chemo, through, "Sorry, Mom, I forgot to call." But I never smiled when I wrote that letter. That version of me, the 15-year-old with trembling fingers, she didn't know how. She just wanted someone to listen. Maybe it's time someone finally did. It was just a wrist, but I knew it wasn't right. Everyone kept saying it didn't mean anything. "It's not a big deal, honey. You're just sensitive." That's how he is with all the girls. But it was a big deal. It was everything. Because I felt it. That hand, too firm for a casual gesture, too soft for discipline, sat there just a moment too long. Long enough to make my breath stop in my throat. Long enough for me to understand, even at 15, that something ugly had entered the room. He touched my wrist when handing me back a graded quiz, an A circled in red. Below it, scribbled in pencil, a note, "Smart girls are the most dangerous." I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. But I heard the giggles behind me. Other girls pretending they were in on a joke I didn't understand. Even now, 64 years later, I still see the blackboard that day. The drawing of a frog's anatomy. The way he said, "Lillian, would you come up here and be our model?" They all laughed then, too. After class, I waited. I didn't know why. He approached slowly, as if expecting it. That smirk, that cologne, that teacher's tie with the tiny pineapples. I asked him, voice barely above a whisper, "Why did you write that on my paper?" He leaned in so close I could smell the coffee on his breath, because I like to keep an eye on the smart ones. That night, I didn't eat. I sat in bed, hands between my knees, heart in my throat. I couldn't stop shaking, but Mama just thought I was catching cold. She brought me tea and 2 aspirin, then kissed my forehead and said, "No more drama, okay?" She meant it kindly. She always meant it kindly, which is what made it worse. Years later, I would call it what it was, grooming. But back then, it was just wrong. And invisible. Wrong in a way that made you feel like the liar. Wrong in a way that grew arms and legs and years. Wrong in a way that still lived in my skin, long after he'd retired, long after my daughter was born, long after I'd learned to smile through everything. Funny. I can still feel that wrist sometimes. Not the touch, but the shame. Like my own bones were guilty of something. What happens in our house dies in our house. That's what Mama said. She was chopping onions when I told her. The knife didn't stop. She didn't even look up. I stood in our tiny kitchen, hands clenched, voice trembling. He wrote on my test. He touched me. My knees were knocking. I could hear my own blood rushing. She finished the onion, slid it off the board, then turned to me. Calm, cold, controlled. "Don't say that again." I didn't understand at first. I thought she hadn't heard me. So I said it again, louder. And then, the sound. Not her voice. The drawer. That heavy wooden one by the stove. She slammed it so hard, every fork and knife screamed. Then she looked at me like I'd spit in church, like I'd desecrated something sacred. "You want people thinking you're some kind of temptress? Do you know what kind of girl says things like that?" I was 15. I didn't know anything. She made me sit down at the kitchen table, told me to put my hands flat. Then she leaned close. "He's a good man, a teacher, a Christian. You do not ruin a man like that over teenage nonsense." I didn't cry. Not then. I sat perfectly still, the way I did in his class, back straight, hands folded, smile nowhere to be found. Mama went back to the stove, The air smelled like scorched onion and betrayal. The next Sunday, at church, Mr. Alden smiled at us from 2 pews ahead. Mama smiled back. I wanted to scream, but I was wearing white gloves and a pinched little hat, and there's only so loud you can scream when you've been raised to be good. That night, I pulled out Papa's old typewriter, rolled a sheet of paper into it, typed until my fingers ached, the letter to the school board. The truth, clean and hard and mechanical, letter by letter. I left it on Mama's pillow. Next morning, it was gone. No words, no confrontation, just gone. A week later, she made me deliver a plate of banana bread to Mr. Alden's house, said it would clear the air. He opened the door in slacks and a sweater vest, took the plate, winked. Tell your mama I appreciate her kindness. I didn't speak for 3 days, not because I was silent, because I was erased. That's when I started smiling, every day, for survival. Not because I was happy, not because I was healed, because I was learning something older than pain. When you smile, they stop asking questions. I smiled at school. I smiled when Mr. Alden called me quiet but clever. I smiled when boys teased me in the hallway. I smiled when Mama said, "See, everything's back to normal." But inside I built a room, windowless, cold, a place where no one could touch me, not my skin, not my thoughts, not even my name. And I stayed there for years. There was no name for it back then. Not PTSD, not trauma, just a girl with pale knuckles and perfect posture who used to be brighter. My grades held. I stopped raising my hand. He moved on to other girls. I watched him pick them out like fruit, the lonely ones, the eager ones, the quiet ones like me. And I did nothing. Because what was I going to say? He touched my wrist? He winked too long? He made me feel like my body didn't belong to me anymore? I got good at pretending. I learned how to change the subject, how to laugh on cue, how to smile when someone told me, "You're so mature for your age." Even the guidance counselor said I had a graceful calm. Graceful. Calm. He didn't see me dig my fingernails into my palms every time someone stood too close. One afternoon, I was alone in the library trying to read To Kill a Mockingbird. But the words wouldn't land. My hands kept shaking. The librarian, Mrs. Dale, came over, squatted beside me. "Everything okay, sugar?" I said. "I'm just tired." And then I smiled. She smiled back, rubbed my shoulder, told me I was a sweet girl, and walked away. That was the moment I knew. The smile works. The world rewards girls who keep quiet, who stay small, who disappear politely, and I disappeared like a professional. Decades later, when my own daughter once said, "Mom, you're always so calm. I wish I had your peace." I wanted to laugh or scream, but I just smiled, because by then, the muscle memory was stronger than the pain. I turned 16. He gave me a necklace. A thin silver chain with a charm, a tiny heart, split down the middle like a cracked seed. He handed it to me in a small velvet pouch just outside the biology lab. His hand brushed mine. Too slow, too soft, too practiced. No witnesses. Just that hallway, the sound of sneakers on tile, and the humming of the vending machine. "Happy birthday, Lillian. You're growing up beautifully." I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and took it. The pouch lived in my backpack the whole day. I could feel it burning through the canvas. He watched me in class, kept catching my eye. When he called on me to answer something about reproductive cells, he smirked. I answered correctly, because I was still a good student, still the girl who knew when to be perfect. At home, Mama had made angel food cake. She wore lipstick for the first time in weeks, said we were having company. It was Mr. Alden. He came for coffee, brought a book about women in science, sat at our kitchen table like a friend of the family. They laughed. They talked about church, about the PTA, about how bright I was, about scholarships. I couldn't eat. I excused myself, went upstairs, sat on my bed and stared at the velvet pouch. I wanted to scream, to throw it out the window, to tear it in half, but instead, I took it outside, found a tin coffee can in the shed, poured lighter fluid inside, and burned it. I watched the charm melt into black ash, watched the pouch curl and shrivel. I don't remember crying. I just remember the smoke in my hair, the cold in my teeth, and the door creaking behind me. Mama stood there, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. She looked in the can, saw the blackened metal. Her eyes narrowed. Then, quietly, "You better be careful, Lillian. You're walking a dangerous line." That night, I packed a bag, a pair of jeans, 2 shirts, my toothbrush. I planned to run, somewhere, anywhere. But when I opened the front door, he was there, Mr. Alden, talking to Mama. I froze. They looked at me like I was 10 again, like I was ridiculous, like I was fragile and foolish and full of imagination. I closed the door, walked back upstairs, unpacked my bag. I didn't run. I stopped trying. That was the year my spine bent inward. The year I became what they wanted, quiet, polite, and forgettable. The year I learned that the world believes the man who smiles back, not the girl who flinches. I didn't write that letter alone. I thought I had. But when I opened the photo album again, the one I'd hidden behind winter sweaters no one wore anymore, I found it. Tucked behind a prom picture, folded twice, yellowed, shaky cursive on blue-lined notebook paper. It was from Joan Ellis, my best friend, back then. I hadn't thought about Joan in decades. We used to braid each other's hair during homeroom, trade sandwiches, whisper about the Beatles and boys and who had the prettiest knees. But one day, she just drifted, stopped talking to me, switched lunch tables. I always thought it was me, that I'd gotten too strange, too cold, too sad, too something. But her note, written in pencil, faded at the edges, said something else entirely. "Lillian, I saw what he did. I didn't know how to help. I was scared, but I believe you. If you still want to write that letter, I'll help." I stared at the page for a long time, then turned it over. On the back were 3 sentences, typed, a draft, a first attempt at the very letter I thought I wrote alone. She'd started it. Joan, the quietest girl in our class, the one who sat in front of me, the one I lost without asking why. Suddenly, I remembered. A phone call that summer. 1 ring, then silence. A hallway conversation that ended too fast. A teacher who whispered Joan's name 1 too many times. Oh God, it wasn't just me. He got to her too. I didn't ask. I didn't look. I didn't want to know. Because back then, knowing meant guilt, meant powerlessness, and I couldn't afford either. I sat on the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. Emma, my granddaughter, passed by the open door. "Grandma, you okay?" I shoved the paper under the album. "Fine, sweetheart. Just cleaning." She smiled and went back to her iPad, and I sat there thinking, how many of us have drawers full of paper like this? Letters written in fear, drafts never sent, truths buried under guilt and time and dust. What happened to Joan? Is she still alive? Is she still quiet? The next morning, I searched her name online and found nothing, just an obituary for a woman named Joan E. Hammond, formerly Joan Ellis, passed away in 2002. No children, no husband, no details, just a photograph. And in it, a face I remembered. Still quiet, still soft, still carrying something heavy behind her smile. I saw her holding my notebook. Then I saw the upload. It was a Thursday. Emma had the day off school. I was folding laundry in the den, humming an old Patsy Cline song under my breath. She wandered into my room, as she often did, looking for markers or gum or nothing at all. I didn't hear the drawer open, didn't hear the rustle of paper. But later, when I went to put the notebooks back in order, one was missing. That notebook, the one with the blue cover, frayed on the edges, The one I started in 1962 and filled over the years in pieces. Letters I never sent, thoughts I never said, words I couldn't speak aloud. I found it on her bed, open. A sticky note on top in her handwriting. Is this real? My stomach dropped. That night, after dinner, she was quiet, eyes flicking to me and back to her phone. Guilty, curious, electric. I didn't ask. I was afraid of the answer. The next morning, my daughter stormed into the kitchen holding her phone. What the hell is this? I blinked. She turned the screen toward me. It was a video, a TikTok. Emma's voice reading from my notebook. One of the letters, my words, my story, captioned. My grandma wrote this when she was 15. I think the world should know. Over 80,000 views. My chest felt like glass. I sat down without meaning to. You shared that? I asked Emma, who was now hiding behind her mother's arms. She peeked out, eyes wide, soft, scared. I didn't think you'd be mad. It was powerful. My daughter was furious, said it was inappropriate, said I should have told her first, said it was too late to open up old wounds. But I wasn't listening to her. I was watching Emma, watching the way she stood there, mouth trembling, fingers clutching the phone like a lifeline. She believed me. That's what shook me most, not the views, not the post, but the look in her eyes. I believe you. Later that night, after the house quieted, I opened the app, read the comments, dozens, then hundreds, then more, some from strangers, some from women my age, and some from girls, young, still living inside it. My aunt went through this. No one believed me either. Tell your grandma we see her. I didn't know whether to feel exposed or held, but for the first time in 64 years, I didn't feel alone. Mom, is it true? It was after dinner. The plates were still on the table, cold peas untouched. My daughter stood in the doorway of my room, arms crossed. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She just said it flatly like reading a test result aloud. Mom, is it true? I didn't ask what she meant, because by now, the silence in the house was screaming. Phones buzzing, cousins texting, old church ladies leaving voicemails full of polite confusion. We saw that video your granddaughter posted. Is Lillian okay? Why would you air family business like that online? Is it true? Such a simple question, and the weight of it, unbearable. I looked up at her. My daughter, the girl I raised, the one I tried to keep safe, the one I never told. I wanted to say, yes, and I wanted to tell you before, so many times. But instead, I said, yes, it's all true. She blinked, took a half step back, like the words had touched her skin. Why didn't you ever say anything? I laughed, not kindly, not because it was funny. I laughed because it hurt so much, it had nowhere else to go. Because when I was your daughter's age, my mother told me not to. Because when I tried, I got burned. Because when I was 15, the only thing I was taught to do with pain was bury it. She looked away. I don't know if it was shame or disbelief. Emma came into the room behind her, clutching her phone like it might shatter. Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mess things up. And just like that, the ache cracked open again, but this time, not in fear, in love. I opened my arms. She fell into them. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and nerve. You didn't mess anything up, I whispered. You cracked something open, something that needed to be seen. That night, my daughter didn't come back in. The door stayed closed, but I heard her crying in the bathroom down the hall. Some silences scream, some crumble, some echo for generations, and some get broken by a teenage girl in a viral video. You're not alone. I remember him too. It was the third day after the video. I was up early making tea, scrolling through the comments again, like poking a bruise to see if it still hurt. Some were kind, some were angry, a few were cruel. but one stopped me cold. Mary Ellen, 54. I had Mr. Alden too. Sophomore year, 61. I never told anyone. I read it twice, 3 times. My fingers went cold around the mug. I clicked her profile. A woman. Gray hair, wrinkles, smiling beside a black lab. I messaged her. I was in his class the year before. I remember. She replied within an hour. He used to make me stay after class. Said I had potential. I didn't breathe for a long time. That night, 2 more messages came in. One from a woman in Ohio, another from Florida. We moved. I never spoke about it. He was my teacher, too. I always wondered if I imagined it. We weren't alone. We were never alone. We were just scattered and quiet and told not to ruin good men's reputations. We started an email thread, shared memories, details, dates. One of them still had a yearbook, scanned a photo of him with his arm around a girl whose smile looked unsure. "That's me," she wrote. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Grief? Anger at a ghost who would never face us? It didn't matter. He was gone. But we weren't. And now, we knew each other existed. I printed those messages and slid them into the old photo album, between the prom pictures, between the letter and the obituary of Joan. They belonged there, in the record. That afternoon, Emma knocked softly on my door. She had a notebook in her hand. "Grandma, do you think I could write down your story? Like all of it? For school?" I looked at her. A girl with a bright mind and steady hands, eyes full of questions, and the one thing I never had at her age, freedom to ask them. "I think," I said, "you should write it in your own words, and then ask me what you still don't understand." She nodded, and for the first time in my life, I felt the beginning of something real, understanding. Not pity, not doubt, just someone trying to understand. You can request archived documents from the district. It was Mary Ellen who told me. She had done it herself back in 2005 when trying to track down a pension issue. She mentioned it offhandedly in an email. If he was investigated, there would be a record. You can ask for copies. They legally have to show you. I didn't think it would matter. He was dead. The school had changed names, buildings replaced, staff retired, but something in me burned, a quiet, hungry flame. What if someone had known? What if someone else had said something? The process was easier than I expected. A form, a signature, a copy of my ID. Then, a week later, a thick envelope. Inside, scanned records, faded type, handwritten memos, and one letter from my mother, dated April 4th, 1962. 3 weeks after I wrote mine, typed, neat, on stationery with a rose in the corner. To Principal Everett, I am writing in regard to my daughter, Lillian May. It has come to my attention that she has made inappropriate comments regarding one of her teachers. Please be advised, Lillian has a vivid imagination and a tendency to dramatize. I ask that you do not engage further in these matters. Our family will address the issue privately. With respect, Dorothy M. Franklin. My fingers trembled. I read it again and again. Each time it felt heavier. Heavier than the original betrayal, heavier than Mr. Alden's touch. Because this was proof. She hadn't just ignored me. She protected him. She handed me over to the dark and closed the door. I sat in silence for hours. Didn't cry, didn't scream. The wound was too old for new blood. But I opened my notebook, and I wrote, "You were supposed to believe me first." That night, I burned her letter in the same coffee can I used to destroy that necklace all those years ago. Watched the flame twist her rose-printed signature into ash. Then I opened the window, let the smoke drift into the sky, and said quietly, "We're done now." It wasn't about revenge. I just needed air. That's what I told the woman at the library. She had called me after reading the article in the local paper, the one about the grandmother whose truth went viral. She was soft-spoken, younger than my daughter, but with that same careful tone people use when they don't know if you're fragile or furious. "Would you be open to speaking here?" she asked. "We host a local stories series. You'd have complete control. Just your words, in your way." At first I said no, but then I remembered the comment thread, the emails, the faces of women who'd been waiting decades for someone to say it out loud. So I said yes. There were 12 chairs set up that night, most of them filled. No stage, no podium, just a room, a microphone on a table, and the folder I'd brought with me, full of letters, scans, clippings, and the name Joan Ellis, written on the inside flap in fading ink. I didn't read a speech. I read a page from my notebook, the one I wrote when I was 16. He said I was special, but my skin crawled every time. I don't want to be special if it means silence. The room didn't move. No phones, no shuffling, just breathing. A kind of reverence I didn't expect, not for me, but for the sound of truth filling a space that had never heard it before. Afterward, a woman came up to me. White hair, denim jacket, hard hands. He was my teacher, too. That made 4. Emma was there. She sat in the front row, arms crossed, like she was daring anyone to interrupt me. She clapped the loudest, and when she hugged me, she whispered, "I'm proud of you." It hit different, not because she was young, but because she saw me. Not the mask, not the mother of her mother, not the sweet lady with good cookies. Me. When we got home, I left the notebook on the table, and for the first time in my life, I slept through the night. No dreams, just breath. If you ever need to speak, I have a room. That's what I say now, to strangers, to neighbors, to women who sit beside me in church and think I'm just another lady with silver hair and a good pound cake recipe. Because I built a room. Not a real one, not at first, just a circle of folding chairs in the church basement on Thursday afternoons. I called it the Retell Room, not support group, not Survivors Anonymous, not therapy, just a place to speak if you wanted to, or sit if you couldn't. The first week, no one came. The second, 2 women did, both in their 70s. One brought tissues. The other brought a poem she wrote in 1984 and never showed anyone. The third week, the chairs were full. I watched them arrive with eyes like mine, haunted and hopeful, carrying old stories in their bones, in their knees, in their wrists. They weren't victims. They were archives. They were witnesses still breathing. One woman brought a diary from 1969. Another brought a scarf she'd worn the day it happened. She didn't say what it was, and we didn't ask. One just sat and said, "I don't want to die with this still inside me. I keep a notebook now, a new one. I write their names, their years, their truths. No details, no trauma porn. Just the fact that they spoke and that someone listened." One afternoon after our session, I checked the mailbox and found a letter. No return address. Inside, folded into thirds, was a small card that said, "I was in your class, 1961. He touched me too. I never forgot your face. Thank you for surviving." No signature, just a line at the bottom in different handwriting. "You gave me the words. I'm finally telling my daughter." I pressed the card to my chest, closed my eyes, and remembered Joan and Mary Ellen and the girls whose names I never knew, but whose silence I carried like a secret tattoo. I didn't build a movement, or write a book, or sue the school. I built a room and filled it with true things. That was enough. I didn't want the label, but I wore it. It was the newspaper that used the word first. Local Survivor starts healing circle for silent generations. They interviewed me after the library talk, took my photo under the oak tree outside the community center. I wore my Sunday blouse and my wedding ring, even though he's been gone 12 years. They asked me how I felt about the word survivor. I said, "I don't know, I just kept going." The article spread, not like Emma's video, no viral storm this time, but steady. I got letters. Handwritten ones, folded into old envelopes with shaky cursive and lipstick kisses in the corners. One woman sent me a prayer, another a dried rose, and one, just one, sent me back my own words, printed and framed. He said I was special, but my skin crawled every time. The most unexpected letter came from my daughter, slid under my door one morning, just a page, no envelope. I read the notebook. I believe you now. I didn't know how to handle it. I still don't. I wish I'd asked you about your quiet sooner. Thank you for not giving up on me. Sarah. That night, she came to the retell room. She didn't sit in the circle, but she was there, brought cookies, watched, listened. And afterward, when we walked to the car together, she said, I used to think you were just strong. I nodded, smiled. Now I know what that strength cost you. I didn't cry until she drove away, didn't sob, just a few clean tears, not of sadness, not of relief, but of release, like my body was finally willing to let go of something it had held for too long. Survivor. It's not a title I asked for, but maybe it's one I've earned, and maybe it's not just about what I lived through, but what I finally spoke through. I smile. Yes, but not because I hide. They set up a camera in my living room, a small crew from a documentary team, young, polite, reverent. They asked permission before plugging in lights, brought their own coffee, called me ma'am even after I asked them not to. We want to capture your voice, the producer said, not just your story, your voice. That word used to scare me. Voice. I used to think it was something I'd lost. Now I know. It was never gone, just buried, waiting. They asked me to look into the lens and say one thing, one sentence I wanted the world to hear. It took me a moment, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted it to land clean. I said, I smile, yes, but not because I hide. I smile because I lived, and now I speak. Emma watched from the couch. Sarah stood beside her. 3 generations in the same room, breathing the same air, carrying the same story, but finally no longer alone in it. The documentary aired on PBS the following spring. Quiet, beautiful. They called it Unwritten Chapters. We watched it in the community center, same room as the retell room. By then we had 2 full circles of chairs, 30 women, 5 granddaughters, and 1 great-granddaughter curled in my lap, chewing her sleeve, not understanding a word, and yet still part of it all. After the credits rolled, no one clapped, not because they weren't moved, but because something sacred had landed in the room, like silence finally serving its purpose, not to hide us, but to hold us. So yes, I still smile when I garden, when I sing Patsy Cline to myself in the kitchen, when Emma calls me the OG truth teller. But it's not the smile I wore in '62, not the smile that begged to be left alone. It's the smile of a woman who survived without permission, and then finally spoke without apology. I'm still here, and I still smile. But now, everyone knows why. If you're still here, and this story spoke to you, consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the next one.